From the moment filming began, something strange started happening on set. It wasn't part of the plan, it wasn't written in any script, and no director had prepared for it. But everyone felt it. It was subtle at first, just a shift in the air whenever Dylan walked onto the set and Shen Yue happened to be there. A look, a pause, a smile that lingered a little longer than it should have. It wasn't acting, not fully. And slowly, the staff began to realize that the chemistry between the leads wasn't just good. It was too good. So good, in fact, that it started to overpower the entire storyline. One assistant director later admitted that the first time they noticed something was during a simple blocking rehearsal. The scene was supposed to be straightforward, the two characters exchanging a few lines, a light moment, and then a cut. But instead, what happened stunned everyone watching behind the monitors. Dylan looked at Shen Yue with an expression that was nowhere in the script. It wasn't the restrained, scripted affection written for his character. It was something more personal, something unscripted, something genuine. The crew went silent. When the director called cut, he stared at the monitor, replayed the take, and finally muttered, "This is too real." After that moment, things only escalated. Small changes began appearing naturally in their scenes. Dylan's tone softened whenever he spoke to her, even if the line didn't call for it. Shen Yue, who always gave her roles everything, suddenly found herself reacting instinctively to him. She would smile before her character was supposed to. She would look away a beat too late, or look back too quickly, breaking the emotional rhythm of the script, but making it much more intense. The problem wasn't that they were acting badly. The problem was that they were acting too well. Too naturally. Too convincingly. Their connection was shifting the mood of scenes, turning quiet moments into tension-filled pauses, turning comedic exchanges into heartfelt encounters. The writer, who received early clips from the first week of filming, reportedly raised an eyebrow and asked the director, "Do we need to rewrite their relationship?" Behind the scenes, staff members whispered to each other, half joking, half serious, that the two leads were creating their own storyline without realizing it. One lighting tech said, "It's like we're filming a romance documentary, not a drama." Another crew member said that whenever Dylan and Shen Yue stood close to each other, even if the camera wasn't rolling, the air felt charged. They'd laugh together between takes, whisper things only they could hear, and share glances that seemed too intimate for co-stars who were supposedly just acting. Things finally reached a breaking point during an emotional confrontation scene. In the script, the characters were supposed to argue, keeping their distance physically and emotionally. But once the scene began, Dylan stepped closer to Shen Yue than the director expected. Instead of delivering the lines with frustration, he softened, lowering his voice as if he was speaking not to his character's partner, but to Shen Yue herself. Shen Yue wasn't prepared for it either. For a moment, she forgot her lines, caught off guard by the sincerity in his eyes. She tried to continue, but the director abruptly yelled cut. The director walked onto the set, confused and frustrated. "This is not what the scene is," he told them. "You two are making it something else." Everyone knew what he meant, but no one dared explain it. Dylan apologized, but his voice was quiet. Shen Yue kept her eyes on the floor, trying to regain her composure. The director later admitted privately that the problem wasn't the acting. It was the chemistry, too powerful, too raw, and too unpredictable. It was pulling scenes away from their written structure, changing the emotional tone, and even rewriting the audience's perception of the characters. It was becoming a story within the story. Word began spreading across the production team that some scenes might need to be rewritten. The writers were asked to soften romantic tension in certain episodes, to adjust the pacing, or even to redirect character arcs that were becoming overshadowed by the real-life energy between the leads. At one point, producers discussed whether they needed to schedule a private conversation with the actors to dial down their connection because it was becoming impossible to control. But how do you ask two people to stop being natural? How do you ask them to stop looking at each other the way they do when they think no one is paying attention? The off-camera interactions didn't help either. People noticed the way Dylan would stand slightly angled towards Shen Yue even during breaks, or how he would unconsciously pick up things she dropped, or open a bottle of water for her without her asking. Shen Yue, normally bubbly and playful with everyone, had a different softness around Dylan. She listened more closely, smiled more gently, and her eyes warmed in a way that wasn't part of the role. One evening, after a long shoot, a staff member spotted the two walking to the parking lot together. They weren't close enough to be suspicious, but they weren't distant either. They walked slowly, talking quietly, as if time had slowed down just for them. The staff member, shocked by what they saw, later whispered to another crew member, "If this isn't real, then they're the best actors on Earth." The real turning point came during a kissing scene. The script originally called for a light, brief kiss, a moment of surprise rather than deep emotion. But when the cameras rolled, something shifted. Dylan hesitated before leaning in, not because he was unsure, but because he was savoring the moment. Shen Yue's breath caught, and her reaction was genuine. The kiss was slow, gentle, and unplanned. It lasted longer than the script instructed. When the director yelled cut, the entire room was silent. The staff exchanged looks. The director reviewed the footage, sighed deeply, and said, "We can't use this. It's too intimate. It changes everything." They reshot the scene, but even then, the emotional weight between them couldn't be erased. The rewrite team was immediately notified, and several scenes were adjusted to match the intensity of what Dylan and Shen Yue kept bringing naturally. By the end of the month, the production team had one undeniable conclusion: this wasn't ordinary chemistry. This wasn't manufactured romance. This wasn't shallow fan service. Something real was happening, something that couldn't be ignored, something that was bleeding into the script and reshaping the entire story. Internally, the producers panicked, because powerful chemistry can be magic, but it can also be dangerous. It can overshadow the plot, it can distract from the intended narrative, and above all, it can spark rumors that no agency wants to handle. But at the same time, the producers quietly admitted something else: magic like this doesn't come often. The connection between Dylan and Shen Yue was a lightning strike. It was unpredictable, uncontrollable, and unforgettable. And whether it was real or not, it was reshaping their drama into something deeper, something more intense, and something fans would talk about long after the final episode aired. And as filming continued, one thing became clear. No amount of rewriting could fully hide the truth that everyone on set already knew. Dylan and Shen Yue had crossed an invisible line, and the story they were creating together, on screen and off, was becoming impossible to separate. As filming stretched into the following weeks, the tension between Dylan and Shen Yue became something the crew could almost feel physically. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, subtle, and constant. It lived in the small moments, the way Dylan always seemed to drift toward Shen Yue even when the set was crowded, or the way Shen Yue instinctively knew when he was behind her without turning around. People who had worked in the industry for decades whispered that they had never seen anything quite like it. Chemistry is common. Attraction is common. Even flirty co-stars are common. But the kind of connection that rearranges a script, that forces rewrites, that makes producers nervous and directors helpless, that was rare. Too rare. The next major incident happened during an improvised rehearsal session. The director wanted to loosen up the cast, so he asked them to run through a particular emotional scene without using the script. It was supposed to be a simple exercise, something to help them explore their characters. But the moment Dylan and Shen Yue faced each other, everything shifted. Dylan stepped closer than the scripted distance. Shen Yue lifted her eyes with a softness that wasn't rehearsed. Their voices lowered naturally, falling into a rhythm that felt intimate and personal. The emotions they showed weren't exaggerated for the camera. They were raw, almost vulnerable. The director watched silently, the staff watched silently, and for a few minutes, the set felt like a place they were intruding on. When the director finally called cut, he didn't even give immediate notes. He just stared at them, unsure whether to praise the performance or ask them privately what was happening. One of the writers, who witnessed the rehearsal, whispered to another staff member, "If they're acting, they deserve awards. If they're not acting, then we're filming the wrong genre." That day, the producers requested an urgent evaluation of the show's tone. They noticed that viewers might begin shipping the two actors more than the characters, and that wasn't part of the promotional plan. But no matter how the staff discussed it, they couldn't find a solution that didn't involve interfering in Dylan and Shen Yue's natural dynamic. The more they tried to maintain professional distance between the two leads, the closer they seemed to grow. Fans didn't know yet what was happening behind the scenes, but staff members knew it was only a matter of time before subtle changes leaked through fan cams, interviews, or behind-the-scenes clips. And then it happened. A behind-the-scenes video from episode 5 was released, just a short clip of the two rehearsing a scene. But viewers immediately saw what the staff had been witnessing for weeks. Dylan was smiling at Shen Yue in a way that was too gentle, too unguarded. Shen Yue, normally playful in BTS videos, seemed shy around him, her eyes constantly drifting toward him without explanation. The clip went viral within hours. Comments flooded social media, accusing the two of falling too deep into the roles or acting suspiciously close. Hashtags combining their names began trending, and fans began editing slow-motion compilations of their glances and interactions. The production team panicked again. Not because the clips were inappropriate, but because they were real. Their agencies took notice next. A representative from Dylan's team visited the set one afternoon, supposedly for a standard check-in, but everyone knew why he was really there. He observed quietly, watching interactions. The staff held their breath. After 20 minutes, the representative whispered to the director, "They look comfortable, maybe too comfortable." Shen Yu's manager visited the next day, trying to gauge whether the situation was becoming unmanageable. But the moment she saw the way Dylan pulled out a chair for Shen Yue, or how Shen Yue instinctively reached out to straighten Dylan's collar without realizing she had touched him, the manager looked concerned. It wasn't scandalous. It was simply intimate, too natural to ignore. As filming progressed, the chemistry began influencing scenes in unexpected ways. A light comedy moment would suddenly become emotionally charged because one of them delivered a line with unexpected sincerity. A simple touch on the arm would spark more intensity than a full romantic sequence. A glance that was supposed to be casual became loaded with meaning. The editors struggled the most. They spent hours trying to cut scenes without highlighting how much real emotion the leads were putting into their performances. But every attempt felt hollow. The emotions were too deeply woven into the footage. One editor reportedly joked, "We're not editing a drama. We're editing their relationship." Then came the night scene that changed everything. It was a rooftop scene at sunset. The script described a soft, thoughtful moment where the characters reflect on their past. Nothing too emotional, nothing too romantic. But as soon as the cameras rolled, something happened that no one foresaw. Dylan looked at Shen Yue with eyes that held more than the script ever asked for. Shen Yue, caught in the moment, responded with a trembling breath. The two stood close, closer than the blocking required. The space between them shrank naturally, as if their bodies were guided by instinct rather than direction. When Dylan reached out to tuck a strand of hair behind Shen Yu's ear, it wasn't scripted. It wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't approved. But it was real. Shen Yue froze for a split second, her cheeks turning visibly pink. She didn't pull away. She didn't laugh it off. She simply let him do it. The quietness of the moment was overwhelming. Even the camera operator held his breath. After the director cut the scene, the staff looked stunned. Shen Yue turned away shyly, trying to steady her breathing. Dylan looked at the ground, trying to act casual, but everyone saw the truth. His hands were shaking. The director didn't scold them that time. He simply said, "We'll keep it." Because the truth was undeniable. They weren't just acting. Their connection had reached a point where directing them felt pointless. No scripted instruction could match the authenticity of what they were giving naturally. Rumors started spreading within the industry. A producer from another project asked someone on the drama's team, "Are they dating?" Off camera. The staff member didn't answer. Not because they were covering anything up, but because they genuinely didn't know. The line between fiction and reality had blurred beyond recognition. Then, one evening, a sound technician accidentally recorded something unexpected. After a take, when the cameras and lights were down but the microphones were still live, Dylan's voice was heard quietly asking Shen Yue if she was tired. Shen Yue answered softly, saying she felt better whenever he was around. His response was even softer. Too soft to be rehearsed. Too soft to be casual. When the recording was reviewed, no one knew what to think. Was this acting? Was it real? Was it both? As the drama neared its final weeks of filming, the staff knew one thing. This project would be unforgettable. Not because of its plot, not because of its production, but because of the undeniable, uncontrollable, utterly magnetic bond that had formed between Dylan and Shen Yue. A bond that no one expected. A bond that no one could rewrite. And a bond that, whether they admitted it or not, was becoming the realest part of the entire production.